Hi everyone, can you all hear me? For our April webinar series, our speaker is Dr. Susan Phillips, and she's an amazing person. She is an ER resident at North Shore in New York City, and she got her medical degree with a focus in global development and has worked all over the world during times of crisis. I'm going to hand it over to Susan, and she can take it over from there. She's going to be talking about finding your path to success today.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Philipose. I'm, like you said, I'm a resident. I'm training in EM, and I'm really happy to be a part of Seek Mentorship Speaker Series. I'm really flattered that you asked, and I really hope that this presentation helps you in your future careers. So I'm going to touch on a few topics, mainly the job/internship search, and then a little bit on test taking, only because I've taken so many tests myself, and maybe I could pass on some wisdom to you. So you're probably thinking about getting a job right now. It's almost summer. Some people even try to get a job during school. And one of the major things that we should do, or this is the motto of my college actually, is know thyself. So, which is one of the hardest things actually to do. It took me decades, and every single day is like part of that process. And one of the best ways to do it, especially when it comes to your career, is actually to try out different careers, different jobs, and if you can start early, that would be the best thing. So sometimes people do work during school. You got to make sure that you have time for both. Personally, I had a very long commute during high school. It was almost 2 hours each way. And other people, even today, still have that problem if you go to school outside of your kind of neighborhood. And then you also have to deal with homework, which has become more and more time consuming. You have to make sure that you'll have enough time for your midterms and finals. A lot of people have family responsibilities. I personally know a few people who had to take care of a disabled sibling after school, so there was no way that they could actually get a job at the same time. And of course, if you're into sports or you have really strong interest in clubs or activities, then that might be the priority. And some people also have to go to summer school, so it's hard to get a job at the same time as that. Usually your class load is a little bit less, so you can potentially get a job even if you're going to summer school. And if you find yourself in the place where you have to make a choice, obviously you want to choose school. You don't want to miss that's where you're going to make sure you set yourself up for success later on. So this is only if you can work either during summer or during school without sacrificing your education. So summer job. And, some people think I have the summer off. What's the point? You're probably not one of those people if you're listening to this, but it's a good point. You want to relax. You just went through school for the entire 9 months and you don't want to have to work anymore. But there are some good things. You get money if you get a paying job, and it may not be a lot of money, but at least some money. The other things that are a little bit less tangible are that you do get exposure to a field, especially if it's something that you're not that familiar with. You can use it to get your college applications looking a little bit better, because nowadays, especially for more competitive colleges, you can you'll notice that people, if you see like college brochures, you'll see they're bragging about like people who won the Olympics or did something crazy that you're like, how can I even do something like that? You don't necessarily have to. You just have to show that you have some sort of commitment to something, or that you've shown that you can juggle work, school, and that you've filled up your time with meaningful activities. And then the other good point is that you get to spend time doing something you like, or try out something you think you like. You have to get out of the house. And a lot of times, if you're, depending on the type of job you get to spend more time with friends. And you can get job perks. So if you're working at like a fast food joint, you get free food. If you're working at like, let's say, a design house, you can get free clothes, free lunches, etc. That shouldn't be the primary motivation, but it does help. And then also depending on your age, you do have to think about the actual money involved. It's a little dry, but most retail companies, they already kind of have set rates, so there's no real negotiation. Some of them have competitive salaries, considering that's an entry-level position. For instance, Costco has a pretty good wage. And so you're not necessarily always going to have to be cursed to this youth minimum wage that I'll talk about. Then you have minimum wage in New York. So the federal minimum wage is $7.25. Minimum wage in New York is $9, and it's different in different states. And recently we just signed legislation that will help us eventually get to $15, but that won't be at least until 2018. So right now it's still $9. The downside for people under 20 is that there is a potential to make $4.25, which is about less than half of the minimum wage in New York. So starting from your hire date, a company can decide to pay you just $4.25 an hour for 90 calendar days. Now, this is not just, this means that it's for 9 days straight, but it's not that you have to work 90 days before you get this. But for those 90 days, they'll charge or pay you that much. Then they have to go up to the standard minimum wage. But you'll notice that 90 days is pretty much the length of a whole summer. So unless you plan on going back to that person during school or for the next summer, then every time you get hired in a new place, they can start you again at $4.25. It's just something to watch out for that a lot of people don't know about. So there's also, depending on your age, hour restrictions. So if you're 14 to 15, there are restrictions based on whether you're working in school. So the school day or school week is actually defined by whatever hours your nearest public school is in session. Not if you go to private school, they don't count that, and if you're homeschooled, they don't count that. They actually define it as your nearest public school session hours. So if you're 14 to 15 and school is in session, you can only work up to 3 hours a day, and you can't work during school, and you can't work before 7 a.m., and you cannot work after 7 p.m. For that entire week when school is in session, you're not allowed to work more than 18 hours a week. On the weekends, you can work more. You can work 8 hours a day, but you can't work a total of more than 18 hours in that week. So during the summer, you can work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, like a normal work week. And your hours are expanded a little bit from June 1st to Labor Day. So usually you don't want to be working much more than that anyway, so it's not that big a deal. But also keep in mind that you have a limitation on the kinds of jobs you can do. And a lot of this stuff can be found on the Department of Labor website. But it's just something special for 14 to 15 year olds. Now, if you're 16 to 17, it opens up a bit. You have unlimited hours, at least in terms of the federal laws, but you can still get that youth minimum wage, and you cannot work pretty much any job that hasn't been declared hazardous. Usually those are the kinds that have hazard pay. Then you can work in that kind of job. And there's a lot of different kinds of jobs you can do, but certain jobs you can't. For instance, you can't be an explosive expert, can't do excavating, can't do anything that could potentially get you killed, pretty much. Can't do coal mining. And I found this great picture of, because there's a myth that there's no women coal miners, but apparently there are, at least back in the day. So now, usually you're looking for jobs that pay, but also keep in mind that another really kind of fruitful experience is to actually volunteer during the summers and also during when you're going to school. So volunteering actually could get you into locations or environments that you wouldn't normally be able to work in. So let's say you actually are interested in medicine or nursing or any of these branches, these allied health professions. Normally, as a 16-year-old, you actually can't get a job there. But you can volunteer, and you get to see a lot of the volunteers. Speaking from personal experience, working with volunteers, because they are often in the ER and they get to see some of the crazy stuff that can go down. And sometimes they can even help, because we can always use extra sets of hands, without anyone getting too dirty, of course. Animal shelters too really can use volunteers, even like assisted livings, nursing homes, these kind of helping professions. Volunteers are really essential. And so while you're there, you really do learn a lot, and you get to really figure out if you enjoy the job. People love you too. So people want to talk to you and see why you're doing this, and they kind of respect you. So even though you're not getting paid, there is a component where you get to at least interact with a lot of people who may be doing what you want to do. And then eventually you could also get more responsibility, because it's not really as structured as, let's say, working in a retail job. So let's say you want to coordinate something, or you want to, help put together a project. People will be way more open to that. The other thing also is unpaid internships. In a similar vein, because an internship is really career focused, unlike just like, let's say, a regular retail job that you're working as a seasonal worker. There's going to be a lot more mentoring involved, and that may be more important than just getting your hourly wage if you don't need an hourly wage. So get your foot on the door in that type of career, or the company that you want to work in. And it's often where if you find something relevant to your interests and hobbies, you really love it. So definitely consider these, because an unpaid internship, for instance, is going to be easier to get usually as a college student, but the unpaid internships may be like a little bit more open to high school students than, let's say, the paid internships. So how do you even go about doing this? How do you find a job or a volunteer position or unpaid internship? So the most obvious answer for us would be using websites, right? So we've heard of LinkedIn for the most part, even though I don't think most people use it until they're really in a career. I didn't even see the point of it until I was already in grad school, but it actually can help because they have job bulletin boards. You can put yourself up with a profile, professional picture, write down what you want, and people may actually be looking for you. So sometimes people will come to you. And then you have your obvious stuff, like there's monster.com. It still exists, and it's like a big job search site. There's Snag a Job, which I found actually has jobs targeted more towards younger people, and you can even use Facebook. So a real way, though, for the most part, to find the job you really want, probably the one that's suited best for you, is something called networking, which for me as an introvert is terrifying. I hate networking, but I had to learn how to do it. For other people, natural extroverts, people who are able to make conversation very easily, it's actually natural. And if you're good at it, then you should actually use it, because this can actually help you find some great career opportunities, ones that are tailored just for you. Because what happens often is when you go on the website or even the bulletin boards, you think that this is a job that would be suited to you, but then it turns out there's going to be some restriction, or you're pretty much cold calling. When you network, you're talking to somebody, you can actually make sure that your interests align. So there's a lot of literature on networking. I'll just go into it briefly. You're going to hear about this a lot as you pretty much get into your career, because it's something that everyone has to do, unfortunately, or fortunately if you're good at it. So what is networking? It's pretty much like having a strategic conversation. Instead of seeing your friend and then talking about what happened yesterday in fifth period, you're actually having this conversation specifically to make sure that they know who you are, that you have these specific interests, and that these interests or these skills or these strengths that you have could be helpful to them in some capacity. So that's the point. You're trying to convey that to the person you're talking to. Now, it doesn't have to be like right in their face. You can actually make some small talk. You can actually ask them how they're doing, and you can joke around. But at the end of the conversation, there should be some component where that person is thinking about you in a career capacity or in a professional capacity, and walking away thinking, I wonder if there's a summer job out there for this person, because she seems so professional and she seems so knowledgeable. I would love to have her work in X company. So that's kind of what the point of networking is. So who do you try to network with? You want to try alumni groups. It's actually one of the best ways within school, because there's a rich community of alums usually. They have their own group, and you can actually get involved with those groups. You could be like one of the people that calls out to like help coordinate things for them. And the more you get to know them, a lot of them have great jobs. They're founders of companies. You never know, and they can help you. School clubs, you can find opportunities in, even within your own family, like your mom's best friend may know of something, even though you usually avoid your mom's best friend, maybe now's the time to actually like stay down there and make small talk. You can even use your acquaintances. There may be somebody that has a relative who's in a business that you actually have always wanted to go into. So hopefully you like that person, and you can find out. So use every opportunity to network, because you never know who could have the perfect opportunity. So you just always have to keep open-minded, and keep in mind that also means that you have to kind of make it a habit to be professional. That everyone you meet is kind of a potential employer in a way. That's kind of the way you have to think. So every person you talk to, you want to present yourself in a professional manner. So, and that actually helps people who want to help you. If you come off as someone who's not professional, then, then maybe your mom's best friend won't really want to tell you about that lead. But if this person thinks, wow, look at how she's approached me, she seems confident, and she seems like she really knows what she wants to do, those people, they'll want to help you. They'll be impressed, especially that seeing that a younger person has so much motivation. Okay, so part of networking, you'll hear this a lot too as you go through your careers, is something called an elevator pitch. So this takes a lot of thinking, and this goes in along with that know thyself line. You have to do some concentrated thinking about yourself and what you want to do, because you need to encapsulate all of that, all of who you are, into just about 30 seconds. Now, the concept of an elevator pitch is pretty much like this picture. That let's say the CEO of one of the top companies in the world has just walked onto the elevator, and you're about to catch up with him. Now, you have a 30-second elevator ride, and you have to, in those 30 seconds, make this amazing impression on this person, and then have him hire you on the spot. So that's the goal here. So the best way to make sure you can make this great impression is to have something prepared and ready, where you're able to pretty much elucidate everything about yourself that makes you so great, and then you show that person how you're able to benefit him or her. And you should be able to say this at any time. You're not just in an elevator. Let's say you're online at a coffee shop, you're at school, you're at an alumni gathering, whatever. At any point, you should be able to tailor it to the person that you're talking to. So how do you make something so amazing? It actually is extremely difficult, and takes some homework, and yet it takes some deep introspective thinking. So first, you want to clarify what kind of job do you want. So right now, you might be at a point that you don't really know, and that means you actually have to have a few different elevator pitches. So that means, it's actually not triple the work, because once you do the first one, the other ones will come a lot easier. But think about the kind of job you want, primarily, and then think about what that job will require. What kind of person will be the most successful in that kind of job? So that's when you write down your skills. What are you really good at? What kind of experiences do you have that make you an outstanding or unique candidate? And what are your strengths? Like, even what you're good at in school, what you notice you're good at with your friends. Like, are you the the person who gives advice? Are you the shoulder to cry on? Like, what is your role even within your friend group? And that can give you a sense of what your strengths are. And so you write it all down. Just write it down. Do not edit it. Do not edit yourself. And then once you think you have it all down, that's when you edit, because you have to edit. Otherwise, you're not going to get it down to 30 seconds. And then you kind of try to find the best traits about yourself, and then format it, because you want to have it go in a certain way. You write down who you are, so you introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Susan Philipose. What are your skills? I am really good at drawing. And then what are you looking for? I'm looking for a position in graphic design. So that's a really simple version. Yours is going to be a little bit better. And then you also want to think about who you're talking to. So you tailor it to the person you're talking to. Is it a CEO? Is it like your mom's friend? Is it your acquaintance that you don't know very much, Melissa? So you don't have to tell Melissa that you're a junior in high school, because she already knows. So you can tell her that other stuff. You know, she already knows your name, so you don't have to say all that stuff. So you're tailoring it to the person you're talking to. And every time you think about who you're talking to, you want to think about how will your presence benefit them, because people don't pay attention, really, even you won't, until you're already clear on how is this conversation helping me. We're all inherently selfish. So once you have that hook where they hear how you're about to help them, then you got them. And so that's the trick to this elevator pitch. So and then when you're making it too, just one of the traps you don't want to fall into is putting in jargon. So if you know, you heard a few like industry buzzwords, and you think that it'll sound good in your pitch, it probably won't. It's probably going to sound silly. Most people don't even really read beyond like a 10th grade level, so you don't need to like try to flower up the language. Make it simple, and then they're probably gonna pay more attention to that anyway. And every time you make a new one, you should read it out loud, because when you write, there's a big difference in how you write and how you say things out in the real world. So it has to sound natural. It actually shouldn't sound rehearsed, even though you're going to be practicing it over and over. Once you actually deliver it, it should sound pretty natural. Like, hey, you're the first person I met that I'm telling this to. That's how it should sound. So that even takes practice. And I'll tell you something that in college, I had a friend who would go sit in the cafeteria. She would dress up as if she were going to an interview, and she would just sit there saying her elevator pitch and answers to interview questions over and over just by herself. That's how we became friends too, because I was just like, what are you doing? And so she explained it to me. I was like, I wish I had that kind of commitment. But if you could do something like that, that would probably be the best. I think she got every job she applied for. Okay, so this is an example. You could just fill in, for instance, hi, my name is blank. I'm a junior at Upstairs High School. So you've introduced yourself. You say like who you are. I'm a junior at Upstairs High School, and I'm looking for a graphic design position for the summer. So now they know like what you're in it for, and then go into what is it that you've done. Like how is it that you even could qualify for a position in graphic design. So as vice president of the Visual Arts Club, I manage multiple funding deadlines, manage large meetings. So it shows that you're actually able to handle deadlines, which is very important at work, especially in graphic design projects. And you're also probably good at graphic design because, hey, I won several art competitions, which help bring regional attention to our school. So these are how you get this person's wheels turning. And then how can you help them? Well, I'm really good at Photoshop and a lot of other graphic design applications. So, hey, guess what? That means you don't need to teach me. I'm going to be able to come in and maybe even help other people who don't know how to use it. And I'm looking to pursue a career in the arts and build on my skills and experience to benefit your future projects. So this is just an example I made. As you advance in your career, it's going to be very different. But right now, it's like a really good, simple example. And you can like kind of play off of that. There's a lot of learning materials on the internet too that are even geared for high school and college students. So the other major thing you also have to remember is that once you get an interview, you then actually have to like spend almost an entire hour with this person. What are you going to talk about? So before the interview, have your talking points ready. That includes number one, that you really should get to know the company really well, because that really impresses people. When you know how many people work in the company, if it's like a Fortune 500, how much they made last year, what their mission and goals and all that stuff are. People love that stuff. So you shouldn't go to an interview without having that knowledge prepared already, because otherwise it shows a lack of interest. And so when it's time for you to talk and explain yourself, you should think about what you're good at and how this company will help you in a future career. Companies like it when you actually include them in your future career plans. I know it's early, but potentially you could end up staying with this company. And then what is it that you bring to the table? How are you going to help this company? And another thing you need to have in your back pocket, because it will always come up, is a bunch of stories about yourself. It usually has to do with a challenge you had, how you overcame it, a weakness that you perceive yourself to have, and how you overcame it, things like that, even interpersonal conflict. But usually the story should always end with how you overcame it, because otherwise there'll be a big question mark left hanging in the air. Doesn't have to be, like this grand triumph, but it should be something where it shows that you are able to address your weaknesses, or you're able to handle conflict well. Um, and then even just to show that you're someone that people can get along with, you should have some personal anecdotes ready as well. Um, so anything that will help you stand out so that the employer remembers who you are. So any unique life experiences, and especially anything that you have in common with the interviewer. People love people like themselves, and and if you know that the interviewer is, for instance, something I always use is, I'm a native New Yorker. So if I know the interviewer is also a native New Yorker, that helps me out a lot, because then we have so many things to talk about. Then we can complain about non-native New Yorkers, which they love. So, and then that bonds people, and then they'll remember you when it's time to finally pick the right candidate. So these are things that you should prepare before the interview. Have it ready, kind of go over it, and then bring it out at the right time. Okay, so the other thing that is probably not going to be very robust at this point is the resume itself. A lot of jobs will not require a resume. Like if you're going to go into a retail job, sometimes they just have a application, which will be a relief. But if you do need a resume, and you should just have one ready regardless, just in case the job that you're looking for needs a resume, main thing is have your name on it, have your contact information on it. Make sure that your email is an appropriate email. So it should have no references to anything like potentially vulgar, no reference to drugs, etc. Now, it may sound obvious, but a lot of people actually do put their personal emails on resumes, and of course that's like immediately a no. They're not going to hire you. They're not even going to read the rest of the resume. So this is an easy fix. Just if you have a email address that may even sound a little iffy, just make a new one. Make a new Gmail or Yahoo or whatever your favorite email platform is. Make a new account. And then since you won't really have a lot of work experience to list, besides your school, like let's say you were valedictorian of your middle school, you might want to write that down. But besides your high school, you may want like a 3-sentence summary about yourself, similar to the elevator pitch. You can use that same work you just did on the elevator pitch to write this. All the work is the same. Highlight your strengths and your skills, just like you do with the elevator pitch. And then also have a skills section. And you do have some skills that you've developed that people are looking for. So especially if you are good at certain applications, even like knowing things like Word, Excel, there are people that don't know how to do it who are higher up in age. So that might be a selling point for you. If you know any languages, you're actively taking any languages, those are great. Any extracurricular activities, and any sports. So the other thing is, a lot of these extracurriculars and sports are the point of conversation. Like if you're hiring manager that's looking at your resume, used to play lacrosse and you play lacrosse, they may just take your resume out of that bundle just for that, just to interview you. And then make sure that the format is perfect. So everything needs to be indented and pretty much the same font and all that stuff. Everything needs to be formatted correctly. And after you write it, you have to have it proofread multiple times, not by just yourself, but by at least 2 adults, maybe a few friends. And after they proofread it, you have to proofread it again, because you want this to look very professional. And so when it comes to the inevitable, and this is not to bum everyone out, but at every point in your life, you're going to have to face this. There is rejection, and it's normal. So it's that, you need one job, but you're going to apply to a few, and many won't even respond to you. Like, they won't even say anything. You send out an application, you're waiting. They don't even say anything. But the more times you apply, the more rejections you get. I'm sorry to say, the easier it becomes. And then the only thing you have to keep in mind is that you just need one person to say yes. So set up as many interviews as you can, especially at this point in your life, because each of one of these interviews is a learning experience. Because you're going to learn something new from each interview. They're going to have new questions for you. You're going to realize, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. And then for the next interview, at least you'll be prepared. And sometimes you can prepare yourself as much as you can before, but there's just some things that you can't help during the interview process. You're going to have to learn some techniques prior to each interview to calm yourself down, or maybe to amp yourself up, depending on what kind of person you are. You won't know until you go. If you do get a rejection after you interview, you should actually ask why. This is hard because you don't want to know why. You just want to forget that you actually met someone in person, they actually rejected you. Because, of course, it's hurtful. But if you can actually ask, swallow your pride and ask, you may find out something about yourself that'll make you successful in every subsequent interview. So it's worth it. And remember, you're going to get rejections, but you can't work for everybody. You can only work for one job, maybe 2. But that's the way you should think about it. And remember that every successful person has been rejected. The most successful people have been rejected a lot, more than anyone else, because the reason why they're so successful is because they keep trying. The more they try, the more they fail, and then eventually they win at something, and that's why you know their names. That's how successful people work. And so you should also try to work like that. Don't let one rejection get you down. Okay, so actually one of my friends had shared this with me. It was just posted actually yesterday. It's a Princeton psychology professor. Princeton, I think, is the #1 Ivy League right now. So he actually made a resume pretty much of all his failures, posted it online. So what you're seeing here, PhD in econ for Stockholm School of Economics, Cambridge, Harvard University, Stanford University, London School of Economics, so the top schools in the world. Those are all the degree programs he didn't get into. Those are all his rejections. The academic positions, his fellowships, I did not get. Those are ones that he actually interviewed for and did not get. So pretty much the smartest and the most successful people you know have been rejected. Just remember that. Okay. So once you actually start your job, make sure you stay diligent. Use every day to become better. And it's really important that you do work hard, but I think especially for girls and women, what we believe is that we work hard and we keep our heads down, and then someone's going to notice how hard we're working, how we're working harder than everyone else, and then reward us for our work. But unfortunately, that's actually not how it works for the most part. It does work like that sometimes, but sometimes you actually have to be vocal about your accomplishments, because what happens is that when someone else is more vocal about how they want a raise or they want more responsibilities, no one's going to really see that you're working so hard. They'll see that you're productive and they'll be really thankful for it. That doesn't mean that they have to do anything about it. So you should be vocal about your accomplishments when you actually have them. Like, if you can actually point to real accomplishments that you've made. Be realistic, of course, but you should actually bring it up with your boss or whoever is managing you. It's also going to be helpful for when they need to write your letter of recommendation, because now it's in their heads like, oh, I remember that she actually managed this entire project and she did it so well. And how does this guy remember? Oh, because you probably told him. Otherwise, they don't usually remember. They have other things on their heads too. Remember never to burn bridges, ever. Even if you hate the job, you don't know who else is there and who may have been watching your good work. You may not know while you're there. You may find out later. So keep in contact with people. Never burn bridges. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you feel like people are using you, abusing you, asking you to work more hours than you should, or actually in some way harassing you, you have the right to be free for any of that type of abuse. And you should report it to HR. You should not be scared because of your age. And I just wanted to bring that up just in case, because it is a possibility. Okay, so let me tell you a little about myself, because or where I'm coming from. So I did start working technically probably around age 12. I was babysitting. Believe it or not, that counts. You can write down babysitting as one of your jobs, and then, whatever your aunt will be your reference. Middle school, I had mandatory volunteering. I hated it. But then it turned out I could write it on my resume, which helped me out in high school. But because when something is mandatory, why would you like it? So if you can volunteer, you should volunteer. That's the point of that. And I also had little odd jobs because I had a certain skill. I was good at drawing. So I started doing that in middle school and up into high school. And it was actually helpful for me because I was able to say I won this or I won that, even though technically, I had not much work experience, but it sounded impressive. In high school, I did a job at a summer day camp. I did filing for a car company. And to be honest, when I did that, it was over the summer. I probably fell asleep a lot. It probably wasn't very impressive, but it was an experience, and I knew that filing was not for me. So there's something. I was just a member of a few clubs. I didn't take on any leadership positions in high school. And like I said, in high school, I had about a 2-hour commute each way. So I was a little limited. And then I also did some activities with my church, and a lot of people will have that, which is an easy thing to write on your resume. Like part of the youth, some sort of youth activity at my mosque or my church or my temple, something like that. And then in college, that's when I started stepping up my game a little bit. Got a sense of what I wanted to do a little bit more. So I did work during school. And even though it is not very much fun to work during school, it does impress people because it shows that you're able to do time management. I took on more leadership positions. I made sure to do a semester away. And while I was in my semester away, I worked for an NGO dealing with nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And then I did a few more medical internship, public relations internship. And that's how I eventually got to the kind of career I'm in now because of the kind of exploration I did in college. So eventually, I did do a few more jobs afterwards. I did some test prep. I worked in advertising, and I decided that I really liked my time working for this UN-related NGO, really liked my classes on government and international relations, but I also really liked my internship with doing kind of medicine. So it was kind of a weird thing because I was like, how can I reconcile all of this? Ended up where I am now, which is in residency and with a strong interest in actually international development. So to get there, I had to do a lot of testing. That's the main thing. So I had to do the MCAT, and there are already 3 more major board type of tests I've taken just to get to the level I am at now. I think the LSAT as well. Sorry, can people hear me? So hopefully you can hear me because it's saying that I have a bad network connection. Okay, good. So the main point of that is that I did a lot of studying, and I'm not a good studier. I'm actually pretty bad at it. I do a lot of procrastinating, which is what you're not supposed to do. I used to do my studying, was surrounded by people, and it was very loud. I used to get distracted all the time. But then I came to a point in my life where I had to take something called the Step 1, which is in medical school. And the very first thing I did is, or the entire class, the class as a whole, had to take a mock test. And the mock test was just like the real thing, except at least it didn't count towards your score. And this Step 1 determined the rest of your career for some reason. I don't know why, but it was at the end of my first year, and I don't know why or second year, sorry, and I don't know why it determined everything, but it was that important apparently. So I take the mock test, and I get one of the lowest scores possible, like a ridiculously low score. And all this time, I thought I would be just fine. I'm used to having all these poor study habits and still doing it fine. But now here I am in this place where I could potentially like ruin my life because of my poor study habits. So that's when I started looking into a few more things. And mind you, I was already doing or good at test prep and teaching it, but I wasn't actually following it like I should have been. So now here's what worked for me. Because as obviously it worked out. I did fine. I did well, and because I changed the way I studied. So basically, there's a few important things. You have to choose your environment very carefully. Depending on the type of person you are, you may need a lot of quiet, or you actually might need ambient noise. So that's not the same thing as when you have a lot of people interrupting you and talking to you, but it's ambient noise means it's just like overarching kind of noise all around you that's not really specifically targeted at you, so it's not going to distract you. I'm that loud ambient noise type of person, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think that a lot of study tips talk about, have to be quiet. I can't study in quiet, and I know that there are a lot of people that can't. I grew up in New York City, so quiet is actually distracting. And make sure you have good lighting, and like I said, no distractions. That's what's important. So distractions are different for every person, but it's usually that you don't want someone interrupting you. Distractions also count as being hungry, needing to pee, needing to watch the latest episode of Game of Thrones. So those are the kinds of distractions you also want to avoid. So that means you have to target the time that you're going to be studying. So it has to be the same time of day too. You want to make your body used to a schedule. So based on studies that were done on our diurnal variations of our body clocks, apparently morning hours are better. But again, I'm one of these people that I'm saying no because I'm a night owl. And if I study in the morning, I'm just going to fall asleep. So there are a lot of people, and for the majority, morning hours are better. But if you know yourself as a night owl, then you may have to find that special time for yourself. And make sure that you have everything you need at the study station. So make sure you have your water, your snacks, your pen, because otherwise you're going to use that as an excuse to get up every 5 minutes and distract yourself. And turn off your phone. That's really important because you're not going to get a good amount of studying done when you're constantly checking your phone. Do a little every day, because really the best way to learn is by repetition. So even if you plan on cramming at the at the very end, if you actually do a little every day, that last cramming session is kind of like another repetition. At the very least, you've seen something twice. You're seeing it a third time. Hopefully, you'll keep it in your head for the test. And the more you see it too, the more likely you're gonna to keep it in your head for a longer time. So otherwise, you're gonna lose like pretty 80% of what you learned. So repetition is the key. And then you can use mnemonics, which I'm going to talk about. They are your best friend. So even the act of making the mnemonic, I think, is what really helps, because when you're making mnemonics, which is pretty much memory enhancers, you're actually thinking through the concept. So that's another part of learning, is looking at something mindfully or consciously instead of just kind of skimming over it. So even the process of making a mnemonic is helpful. And then consider writing notes by hand as well, because that's what apparently the studies are showing, is that better than typing, the actual process of writing it down is helping your mind remember it better. So when to study. I think this is a really important part. So when you're going to school, it's either before or after school, right? And so some people just can't study before school, but if you can, which is morning time when you're supposed to be better at learning, you should study before school. So it's all dependent on you. When are you going to have the least amount of distractions? When is it that you don't, if 6 p.m. is the best time to study, but that's when you're supposed to have dinner, then you can't study then. So you have to make sure it's a time that you will consistently not have distractions and keep that time every time. When you're not in school and you have, let's say, an entire month to study for a big test, for instance, then choose a time when you're the most alert. Always incorporate breaks if you're studying all day. Make sure that the breaks are enough to refresh yourself, because when you do study for too long, you actually, there's diminishing rate of return. You're not going to remember that stuff. So exercise, meditate even, and even snacks. Those all count as ways to refresh yourself. When you go on YouTube for quote-unquote 15 minutes, that's going to turn into hours just watching cat videos, so that's probably not something you should do. You had to choose something you know you'll just do for 15 minutes. And make a schedule of topics that you want to learn and which days you want to learn it, and then have a general idea of how long you should be studying for. This is for especially when you're not going to school, when you have, like, let's say, a week of off time to study. Okay, so memory tricks. So you've heard of mnemonics. By this point, everyone's heard of PEMDAS. That's the mnemonics, an acronym. And mnemonics are really helpful because it helps you memorize things that are otherwise like meaningless. Like you're once you hear someone say parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction, you're like, okay, and what am I supposed to do with that? So that's why for these types of things, mnemonics are very helpful. I mean, by now I know this. I don't need PEMDAS to remind me, but I did need it to remind me that year when I learned it. And then now it's natural. So hopefully most things that are mnemonic from when you were a child are actually pretty natural to you now, but you did need to learn it then. So it's mnemonics are helpful for something like this, or things that go in a certain order, like your planets, like groups or lists that, otherwise your brain can't really wrap its head around it. So acronyms, phrases, a lot of times putting things to song. And let's say you need to make your own mnemonic because there's no mnemonic really in existence yet, or the mnemonic that you have right now, you're like, this is worse than actually just learning it and memorizing it, which I've encountered with a lot of mnemonics. So make it your own. The way to make your own mnemonic is actually to make it very personal or shocking. Like, so shocking you probably wouldn't want to say it out loud to someone else. They'd be like, what is wrong with you? Because that's what makes you remember it. The more shocking it is, the more memorable, and that's how it doesn't leave your brain. Because otherwise things just like, whoop, go right out of your brain. When there's an overwhelming amount of information, you may want to consider something called a memory palace, which I've only heard of when I was studying for the step 1, which is that medical school test I told you about, which I really needed and helped me. So I'll tell you the backstory. As a break, I decided to watch a horrible movie. It was called Dreamcatcher. It was based on a Stephen King novel. Stephen King, at some point, actually allowed people to use his books to make movies with very little money. Like, they didn't have to pay him for it. So someone decided to make this movie. And it was just a ridiculous movie. But it did introduce me to the concept of a memory warehouse. So pretty much one of the characters had set up in his brain a memory warehouse where he would put memories into different parts of his brain. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I looked it up. And it's actually it was used a lot by memory jocks. There are actual competitions where people just focus on looking at a deck of cards and the order the deck of cards is in. And they can tell you after just looking at it the exact order. And so there are competitions devoted to things like this, and you don't even need to be extremely smart. You can have an average IQ and still do this and remember like a magical amount of information. And it's perfect for visual learners, which all of us kind of are. And I'm just going to touch on it briefly. So it's actually credited to Cicero as a poet, and the story goes that apparently he was about to attend a banquet, and suddenly the building all collapsed, and they couldn't identify any of the bodies. And only Cicero could, because he had seen where everyone was, and so just by using his memory palace, he was able to identify every single one of the bodies of everyone in this banquet. Probably not a true story, but that's where apparently the concept came from. But it's been documented in like Roman literature, Greek literature. It's got different names: memory of loci, Roman room, journey method. But the concept pretty much is you take, for instance, a location you know very well. So, like for instance, your route walking home, and then using that, you'll use that same route walking home to memorize different kinds of things. So let's say today what you need to do is memorize all the countries in the world sorted by their continent. So you use your route walking home. So that means you're on 30th Street and you always see the same big boulder on the floor. And then when you pass by the Tulip Garden, then you see Ms. Smith's dog every single day on your route walking home. So that's a place you know very well. So you actually incorporate all these countries into that imagery. So you can even add in like the capitals of those countries sorted by important dates, and then associated with all the visual objects on your route. The more personal the imagery, the more shocking or fantastic the imagery, the more likely it is that you'll remember it. People use it just to remember random numbers. Like they'll say a 3, if you turn it around, looks like an M. If you want to say 33, it looks like 2 M's. And then they'll just do associations that only work for them. So 2 M's, that reminds them of summer. And so then they'll go on from there. It won't make any sense to you because that's not the same association you'll have. It has to be your own. And so there's a lot of actually information on the internet on how to go about making your own. But I'm telling you, this is actually how I was able to memorize a large amount of information. Just lists and lists of meaningless information using this technique. And then the last thing I'll touch on for test taking is the multiple choice system, which is my favorite kind of test because I don't have to do recall, I can just do recognition. And I like that there's a finite number of choices. It's good for you because that means that instead of having a 0.1% chance of getting the answer right, now your chances go up to 1/5, let's say, or 20% chance of getting it right. Now, if you can even cross out the obviously wrong answer, now your chance is up by 1/3. Let's say your questions that have the words always and never usually are wrong. And then you can also eliminate outliers, like choices that are very different from the other ones, because usually they want all the answer choices tend to be similar so they can fool you, or make sure you get to the right one. But then if there's one that's like clearly different from all the other ones, that's not going to be your right answer. So you can make your chance of getting it right if you just have 2 answer choices left, go from 20% to 50%. Now, let's say you have a question that says none or all of the above, as long as that's not what all the questions look like. If you have an answer choice that says none or all of the above, around 50% of the time, that answer choice is correct. So if you've already narrowed it down and one of your answer choices is none of the above, that's probably the right answer. The other thing is that longer choices are often the right answer too, because in order to be the correct answer, usually it has to have a lot of wording to make it correct. And wrong answer choices, you can be a little bit more simple about it. So those are all ways that you can actually at least get to 50% chance of getting the question right. And if you also are encountering that you're having very long question, like one that, let's say, has a long paragraph, and you're like, how am I supposed to slog through this? Just read the question, the actual question that says, hey, what did Cicero say to Plato? That's what the question is, right? So now you can read the whole paragraph, find that answer, and then answer your question instead of having to slog through the entire paragraph first. So those are just like a quick few hints on how to do a multiple choice. And I'm sorry, I should have said that. So that's it for what I can help you with test prep. Just wanted to tell you about the next speaker that's coming up. It's in May 2016. The founder of Adventure Girl.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you also for introducing our next speaker. It's going to be Tracy Jones. She is the founder of Adventure Girls, and Adventure Girls is a program that she started for mentorship, and they host summer camps annually to help empower young women. So please tune in next month to hear Tracy Jones talk a little bit about her journey and her words of wisdom. And I'll open it up to any questions if anyone has any. All right, Susan, I think you pretty much covered everything. Thank you so much. Some great insights here. Definitely some great examples that will keep me thinking of all the perils of wisdom that you've given us. And if you guys have any other questions, Susan will be happy to answer them over email. You can just direct them to us at Speak. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, our email is info@speakmentorship.org. Thank you, everyone.